Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. I feel like I have to apologize because in my last Ask a Crafter video, I mentioned that I don't care for thin dies, and I had mentioned that I had bought this at a stamp show, and it's a beautiful die, but I always had a hard time getting it to cut right, and most of that is due to my laziness. So somebody sent me a very thoughtful letter about how this company, Cheery Lynn Designs, was her favorite company. They're beautiful to deal with, and they were very hardworking, nice people. And she also said that thousands of people watch your videos, Lindsay, and when you say that you don't like a product, that could really hurt somebody's business. And I felt awful about that because it is a beautiful die, just more that I'm lazy. So I actually played with the die last night and figured out exactly how to cut it properly so that so I'd get good results every time. So I'm going to share that information with you, and let's go to the table and I'll show you exactly how to do it. There we go. So fancy with my camera editing. So I'll show you again these dies. They are beautiful. This is actually, both of these doilies are on that same die I was showing you. It has an innie and an outie. And I'm just going to show you how to cut it. This is actually take two because I wanted to make the video a little bit shorter. So the first thing I did was I went out into my garage, and because I used to just like kind of stack up, you know, an odd assortment of things to get my die cutter to cut these dies right. So I have the old Ellison Big Shot. It only has the cutting base, and it has two pads, which I do have replacements because you have to have a clean one whenever you're doing like nestabilities or anything like that. And then I use a sheet of red rubber on top of my thick cutting platform. And then I went out to my garage. This was a tip from another YouTube viewer. I got out my tin snips and I cut a piece of flashing that was left over from our roofing project. And I thought maybe I would cut against that to give the die more bite, as my YouTube viewer had suggested, but it cut right into it. I think because this is aluminum and not steel. But then I thought, well, why don't I just use that as a shim, because it's not going to compress like paper and cardboard might. So I'm using that on top of the rubber on top of my platform. Then I'm going to put one cutting pad down, and I'm just going to grab a piece of paper. The cool thing about this die, I did find that I could actually use my mat stacks. They were just barely wide enough to use my mat stacks with that. So if you have some cool mat stacks, it's a nice, you know, thing to use it for. In fact, I'll use that this time. And then huge tip is I don't like to cut with the wax paper. I know a lot of people say they like to put wax paper in between their dies and their paper, and I don't like that as much. But what I like to do is just rub it. I'll take a piece of wax paper and I'll rub my die before I cut. And it will help the paper release from my die when I'm done. And I have never cut myself doing this, so I think we're fine. All right, then since this is just barely wide enough, you do have to make sure you line it up good so that it's not going to go over the edge. And this is important, you want to take a piece of tape and tape the die to the paper. That way, because we'll have to run it through a couple times, at least with my Big Shot. So we want to make sure that it's not going anywhere. The other important thing to remember, where this isn't a big deal, this isn't, you know, necessarily true with the thick dies. I've never had a problem with the thick dies no matter which way I cut it. But with these detailed thin dies, you want to cut them so the blades are facing up. Okay, so I'm putting this on my cutting pad, my cutting plate with the blades facing up. And the other thing that's nice about this is you'll be able to see if it's cut through or not when you crank it through. So that I'm going to crank it through once. Now, as you can see, I'm exerting a lot of force here. Okay. All right, now I'm going to roll it back without moving it or taking it out. Okay, I've got white knuckles. I'm really putting some elbow grease in there. And now I'm going to turn it, and I will have to remove part of this leftover paper to do that. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. All right, do you see that? I've turned my paper and die, and it's taped. The paper's taped to the die, so I don't have to worry about it coming undone. I'm going to crank it through, and then crank it back. And the reason for this is that, like you'll notice like in the middle sometimes of your dies, you don't get a really great cut. Because the pressure isn't exactly the same. And I'm going to go through one more time, which may not be necessary, but it will certainly help when we go to remove all the little confetti pieces out from the inside. I'm cranking it through and cranking it back. You get a really good arm workout, upper body workout when you do this. Look on the bright side. Okay, there you can see a lot of the pieces have already fallen away. I'm going to set this out of the way. Going to move my coffee cup there. And what I'm going to do is just kind of tap tap it on my hand and a lot of that confetti's coming out. I'm trying to get all those little bits out before I remove the paper from the die. You can kind of hit the back of it too, that helps the paper come out. So what I meant when I said what I did on my Ask a Crafter is basically that this is more work than I really want to do on most of my dies. So that's kind of where I was coming from with that. I like to crank it through once and call it a day. That's just not possible with these particular dies. And then when you get a few, you'll have a few little bits, let me zoom in, that you really can't just flick out of there. You'll use like a needle, or I just have my compass handy, so I'm just going to use the ends there, and you just poke them through. And there are little holes on the die. You can probably see that. So if you do get the paper stuck in your die, you can poke them out that way. And that's why I don't cut with the wax paper. Personally, I have tried it. I just don't care for it because it seems like I end up with a lot of wax paper in my dies that I have to scrape out. And I'm lazy and I want my crafting time to be as enjoyable as possible. And picking little bits out of my die with a pin is not my idea of a good time. So there we have that beautiful detailed doily. I'm just going to give it a couple of whacks, that will fall out. Now when I was at the stamp show, and look, I'll flick it with my finger and those will come right out. When I was at the stamp show, there was a lady, and I'm not sure what company she was with. She might have been with Tesla stamps or Tesla dies, or I'm not sure. I can't even say. But she would just whack it on the inside of a trash can, and I was like, oh my gosh, those dies are so expensive. I wouldn't dare to do that. But it didn't hurt her dies, so I don't know. But kind of hitting it with the back of your hand works really, really well. So there you can see these dies did cut beautifully. I just didn't want to give anybody the wrong impression, and I got a couple letters from fans of Cheery Lynn designs who were afraid that the fact that I didn't like the thin dies were going to dissuade other people from buying them too. And you know what? I didn't want that to be an issue, because they're a good company. They make beautiful dies. Just because something isn't right for me doesn't mean it's not right for you. So now you know how to cut with them beautifully, and I hope that if I implied that they weren't good, that now I have set the record straight, because I really don't want to give a bad name to a good company. So anyways, there's my tips for cutting really detailed dies. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you like this video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.